They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green. Psalm 92:14. Read those words again, not as comfort, as a declaration. God did not say they might still bear fruit. He did not say they could if they tried hard enough, if they stayed relevant enough, if they kept up well enough with a world that had already stopped waiting for them. He said they will. Present tense, certainty, a promise built into the design of the life that has stayed faithful across decades. If you are watching this video, there is a question somewhere underneath your days that you may not have said out loud to anyone. It is not a dramatic question. It does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, usually in the morning before the house wakes up, or at night when everything has gone still, and it sounds something like this: why am I still here? Not in despair, not in crisis, just honestly, why has God kept me breathing through all these years when so many others have already gone home? Is there still something left for me to do? Does it still matter that I am here? That question deserves more than reassurance. It deserves an answer. And the answer God has been building into Scripture since the first page is this: He does not preserve a life without intention. Every breath past 60, past 70, past 80 is a decision God made. Not habit, not momentum, a decision. And behind every decision God makes, there is a purpose, often hidden, often unhurried, often so different from what the world calls useful that it takes decades of living to finally understand what it was. Today we are going to open that purpose up. We are going to walk through what Scripture says about why God keeps certain men and women alive long past the age when the world has decided their story is finished. We are going to meet the people in the Bible whose greatest assignments arrived in their later years, not despite their age, but because of it. And we are going to come to the end of this time together in prayer, asking God to let the truth of this land where it needs to land most, in the part of you that has been quietly wondering whether the years ahead still hold anything worth waking up for. Before we go any further, I want to ask you to do something. Type this phrase in the comments right now: I am still here on purpose. That sentence is not a feeling. It is a fact about how God works, and saying it out loud is the first step toward believing it at the level where it changes something. Again, I am still here on purpose. If this message is speaking to something you have been carrying, go ahead and like this video now. It helps this word reach the people who need it most. And if you have not yet subscribed, this is a good moment to do that. Every video on this channel is built for people in this season of life, and there is more coming that you will not want to miss. Stay with us all the way to the closing prayer. It was written specifically for the people who have been faithful for a long time and are no longer certain that faithfulness has been seen. If that is you, the prayer is for you. Do not leave before we get there. First truth: the breath in your lungs is not habit, it is assignment. Every morning you wake up is a decision God made, not nature, not luck, not the residual momentum of a body that has not yet stopped. God. Job 12:10 says this plainly: In His hand is the life of every creature and the breath of all mankind. That verse is not poetry, it is a declaration of ownership. Every breath belongs to Him. Every morning He could withdraw it and does not. That is not accident, that is intention. Think about what that means past 60. You have watched people leave, friends, a spouse, perhaps, people younger than you, stronger than you, people with more visible reasons to stay. And you are still here. The question that lives underneath that fact is the one few people dare to ask out loud: why me? Why am I still here when they are not? Consider Anna. The Gospel of Luke places her at the temple in Jerusalem, 84 years old, widowed after only 7 years of marriage. She had been living in that temple for decades. Not visiting, living. Day and night, fasting and praying, long past the age when the people around her had settled their conclusions about what her life was going to produce. She had no pulpit, no audience. She just kept showing up. And then one morning, a young couple walked through the doors carrying a 40-day-old infant. Anna looked at that child and she knew. Decades of quiet faithfulness, and it had all been aimed at this single morning. She was not there by habit. She was there because God had preserved her for that exact moment. The same God who kept Anna breathing for 84 years is the one who opened your eyes this morning. He does not sustain a life by accident. There is always intention behind preservation, always purpose behind the continued gift of breath. You are not here because your time has not come. You are here because God's plan for your life has not yet reached its completion. Every morning you wake is the evidence. Second truth, gray hair is not decline, it is coronation. When did you begin to feel that your age was something to apologize for? Most people cannot name the exact moment. It happens gradually. A conversation where the younger voices talked past you, a Sunday morning where no one asked your opinion anymore, a family gathering where you sensed that your presence was appreciated, but your wisdom was not sought. The world has a way of teaching its conclusions without saying them out loud. But God has already said something out loud, and it is the opposite. Proverbs 16:31. Gray hair is a crown of splendor. It is attained in the way of righteousness. Not a symbol of fading, a crown. The Hebrew word here carries the sense of glory, of something earned through a process that could not be rushed or faked. A crown cannot be handed to someone who has not yet lived enough to wear it. Consider Caleb. He was 85 years old when he stood before Joshua and said, "I am still as strong as the day Moses sent me." But look closely at what he was actually claiming. He was not asking for a reward. He was not looking back at what he had already built. He was asking for his inheritance, the hardest mountain still remaining, the territory no one else had dared to take. At 85, Caleb was not winding down. He was stepping forward into the assignment God had been holding for him all along. The crown was not placed on his head when he was young and fast. It was placed there by the years themselves. If you have found your voice growing quieter in rooms that should want to hear it, receive this now. The world does not get to define what your years are worth. God already has, and what He called you is not finished. It is crowned. If this is speaking to something you have been carrying, drop your first name and your city or country in the comments below. Whether you are joining us from Birmingham, Alabama, or Cape Town, South Africa, or anywhere in between, you are seen here, and your presence in this conversation matters. Stay with us to the end. What is waiting in the closing prayer was written for exactly where you are right now. Third truth, the desert years were not detours, they were the curriculum. Picture a man sitting alone in the Midian wilderness, watching someone else's sheep. He is 80 years old. He was raised in a palace, educated by the finest minds in Egypt, groomed for influence and power. Then he made one violent mistake and lost everything. 40 years passed in a stretch of terrain so empty and forgettable that no one came looking for him. Even he had probably stopped expecting that anyone would. That man was Moses, and those 40 silent years were not the gap in his story, they were the making of it. Deuteronomy 8:2 says, "Remember how the Lord your God led you all the way in the wilderness, these 40 years, to humble and test you in order to know what was in your heart." God uses those exact words, led you, not abandoned you, not forgot you, led you. The wilderness was not where Moses wandered. It was where God was working in a silence Moses could not interpret from the inside. There are years in your past that you may still be calling wasted, a season when nothing visible was produced. A decade when the prayers felt unanswered and the doors stayed closed and you could not see the point of any of it. A stretch of life that looked, from where you stood, like failure. But the God who called those 40 years in the wilderness a leading, not a loss, sees your quiet years the same way. He does not waste a season. He uses the ones no one else would choose. The burning bush came after the desert, not before. What God prepared Moses for in silence, he revealed in fire. The years you have been calling a detour may be the very ones he calls your formation. Fourth truth: slowness is not the end of usefulness, it is the beginning of depth. The world measures a person by their output, how much they produce, how fast they move, how much energy they still have left to give. By that measure, a man who cannot see clearly and whose hands tremble and whose steps have slowed is a man whose best work is already behind him. God does not measure that way. Ecclesiastes 3:1 says, "There is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens." Not some things, everything. That means the season of slowing is not outside the design. It is inside it. God built it in. He assigned it the same word he assigned to every other season of life, a time, his time, on purpose. Consider Isaac near the end of his years. He was nearly blind. His body had become a fraction of what it once was. Any reasonable observer would have said his days of significance were finished, but Isaac called his sons to him, one at a time, and he spoke blessings over them. Quietly, without standing, without strength, and those spoken blessings carried generational weight that has echoed through centuries of recorded history. His physical power was gone. His spiritual authority was not. In fact, it may have been more concentrated in those final slow years than at any point before, because everything unnecessary had been stripped away, and what remained was pure. There is something that can only be produced by slowing down, a quality of presence, a depth of listening, a capacity to see what fast-moving people run past without noticing. You cannot manufacture that in youth. You can only arrive at it. The slower pace of your later years is not a loss. It is a different kind of strength, the kind that stays when everything else has been taken. Fifth truth: the prayer of an elder carries weight the young have not yet earned. You have been praying for the same people for decades, a child who has not come back to God, a grandchild heading into a season that frightens you, a friend whose marriage is quietly falling apart. You pray in the morning before anyone else is awake. You pray at night when the house is still, and sometimes you wonder whether those prayers are landing anywhere at all. They are. James 5:16 says, "The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective." Not the prayer of a young person, not the prayer of a gifted person, the prayer of a righteous person. Righteousness here is not sinless perfection. It is the settled, tested loyalty of a life that has kept returning to God across decades of difficulty. That kind of righteousness is not built quickly. It is built slowly, through exactly the years you have already lived. Consider Abraham at 99 years old, standing before God and pressing for the lives of people in Sodom. Not his own people, not his family, people who did not deserve his intercession and probably did not know they had it. He stood there and negotiated with heaven 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10, because something in him understood that his access to God was real and that it mattered. His age did not diminish that access, it deepened it. A younger Abraham might have accepted the first answer. The older man knew how to stand and keep standing. There are people alive today because of prayers you prayed in rooms no one else entered. There are generations being held together by intercession you will never receive credit for in this life. The prayers of your later years are not the quiet activity of someone with nothing left to offer. They are the most powerful work you have ever done. God has heard every word. Not one of them has been lost. Sixth truth: the stillness of later years is not silence, it is sacred positioning. There is a kind of authority that cannot be performed. It cannot be announced or accelerated. It settles into a person the way sediment settles to the bottom of still water. slowly, over time, because the movement has finally stopped. You cannot produce it by trying harder. You can only receive it by staying. Isaiah 46:4 records God saying this, "Even to your old age and gray hairs, I am He. I am He who will sustain you. I have made you, and I will carry you." Read that carefully. He does not say, "I will use you when you were strong and carry you now that you are not." He says, "I have made you and I will carry you," as one continuous act, the making and the carrying belonging to the same hand across every season. Think of Simeon. Luke places him in the temple on an ordinary morning, an old man who had received one promise from the Holy Spirit and had been waiting for it, quietly, for longer than the text tells us. He had no title, no congregation. He was simply a man who had been faithful long enough that heaven trusted him with a specific assignment. And on that morning, something moved him to go to the temple, not a voice, just a stirring, and he obeyed it. When Mary and Joseph walked through the door with the infant Jesus, Simeon took the child in his arms and said everything heaven had kept inside him for years. In that moment, all the waiting became the point. The stillness had not been emptiness, it had been preparation. There is something God is holding inside you that the waiting has been preparing you to release. The quiet years have not been wasted, they have been loading. When the moment comes, you will know what to say. These are the truths that the Word of God has always held in plain sight. They are not hidden, they are simply overlooked, passed over too quickly in the Sunday sermons that move from verse to verse without stopping long enough to let a truth settle into a life. But there is a second kind of truth, deeper, less familiar. The kind that only becomes visible after a person has lived long enough and suffered enough and waited long enough to finally be ready to receive it. These are the things God reveals not in the bright seasons, but in the quiet ones. Not to the crowd, but to the ones who stayed. If you are still here, you are one of those people. First, mystery. God often saves his most important assignments for last. Ask most people why God chose Noah, and they will tell you it was because Noah was righteous. That is true. But there is something else in that story that does not get named as often. Noah was not a young man when the call came. He had already lived through enough of the world to understand what God was grieving. He had watched what happened to people who walked away from God across generations. He had seen it not as a theological problem, but as a lived reality. His years were not incidental to his calling. They were the reason he was ready for it. Haggai 2:9 says, "The glory of this present house will be greater than the glory of the former house." God spoke those words to a generation who believed their best days were already behind them. People who had seen the first temple in its full splendor and were now looking at a rebuilt structure that seemed like a pale shadow of what once was. And into that discouragement, God said, "What is coming will be greater than what was." He does not say that to mock them. He says it because he can see what they cannot. There is a reason that some callings do not arrive until a person has lived past 60, past 70, past 80. Not every assignment can be carried by someone who has not yet been broken enough to be trusted with it. Not every message can be delivered by someone who has not yet paid the price that gives it weight. The later years are not the postscript to the story God wrote for you. For some people, they are the chapter the whole story was building toward. What God has been forming in you across all these years is not finished. In some cases, it has not yet been released. Second mystery. The silence of God in later years is often preparation, not punishment. There is a specific kind of loneliness that belongs only to those who have prayed faithfully for a long time and heard very little back. Not the loneliness of someone who has never known God's nearness. That would be easier in some ways. There would be nothing to miss. This is the loneliness of someone who remembers when God felt close and cannot explain why that closeness seems to have withdrawn. Lamentations 3:26 says, "It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord." That verse is not easy comfort. It was written by a man sitting in the ruins of Jerusalem, surrounded by evidence that things had gone terribly wrong. And into that ruin, he did not offer an explanation. He offered a posture: wait quietly. Not because the silence means nothing, but because the one who is silent is still the Lord. Consider Zechariah and Elizabeth. They had prayed for a child across decades of marriage. The years accumulated, the prayers continued, the silence from heaven did not break. By the time the angel Gabriel appeared to Zechariah in the temple, they were both described as very old. A lifetime of unanswered prayer stood between them and that moment. But that silence was not indifference. Inside it, God had been positioning them to raise the one voice that would prepare the entire nation for the arrival of the Messiah. The answer they had been waiting for was always coming. It was simply waiting for a moment that their younger selves could not have carried. When God grows quiet in your later years, the silence is not the end of the conversation. It is the held breath before he speaks something you are finally ready to hear. Some answers could not have come any earlier. You had to become who you are now to receive them. Third mystery. Your scars are not evidence that God failed you. They are the credentials heaven gave you. Most people look at the painful chapters of their life and draw the same quiet conclusion: something went wrong that should not have gone wrong. The suffering was a mistake. The loss was a detour. The years of confusion meant that God was absent or inattentive or simply not as close as they once believed. But what if the wound was the preparation? 2 Corinthians 1:4 says, God comforts us in all our troubles so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God. Read the logic embedded in that verse carefully. The comfort does not bypass the trouble, it moves through it. The very place where you were broken becomes the place where you are equipped to reach someone else who is breaking. Think of Joseph standing before his brothers in Egypt. Behind him were years of betrayal, slavery, and false imprisonment. A sequence of suffering so extended and so unjust that any reasonable person would have concluded God had either forgotten him or was indifferent to him. And yet Joseph looked at everything that had been done to him and said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Genesis 50:20. He was not performing forgiveness. He was speaking from a place only suffering could have given him. His wounds had become his wisdom. His scars had become his authority. You carry things from your past that you have never been asked to explain in a sermon. Losses that did not resolve neatly. Seasons that left marks. But those are not the evidence of a life God missed. They are the evidence of a life God was forming. The person who needs what you carry has not found it anywhere else. Only you have it, because only you lived it. If someone came to mind just now, someone who is carrying what you once carried, send this video to them today. One person, that is all. Fourth mystery. You were not kept alive to finish old work, you were kept alive to begin new work. There is a temptation, past a certain age, to measure your remaining years against what you have already built. To look back at what you once carried, the roles, the responsibilities, the relationships, the seasons of productivity, and to assume that what is ahead is simply a quieter version of what is behind, a slowing continuation, a gradual conclusion. But God does not think in conclusions, He thinks in new things. Isaiah 43:19 records God saying, "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it?" That question at the end is worth sitting with. Do you not perceive it? The implication is that the new thing is already present and already moving, and that the only thing required of the listener is to stop looking backward long enough to see it. Think of Sarah, not the young woman who laughed at an impossible promise because her body and her logic both said it was too late. Think of the older Sarah, the one holding a living child in her arms, saying, "God has brought me laughter. Genesis 21:6. She was not restored to her youth. She was given something she could not have held any earlier. The new thing was not a return to what she had before. It was something she had never had at all. What God is preparing for your later years is not a restoration of your earlier capacity. It is something new. Something that required all these years to make you ready to receive it. Something that a younger version of you would not have known what to do with. The chapter ahead is not a faded echo of the chapters behind. For some people, it is the chapter that gives the whole book its meaning. You are not finishing, you are beginning. Fifth mystery, the generation beneath you does not need your energy, it needs your endurance. A younger generation has things you no longer have: speed, physical stamina, the particular confidence that comes from not yet knowing how many things can go wrong. These are real gifts, and they carry real weight. But there is one thing a younger generation cannot give itself, no matter how gifted or how determined it is. It cannot give itself the example of what faith looks like after 60 years of walking through everything life can throw at it. Titus 2:2-3 instructs the older men and older women of the church to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-controlled, reverent in the way they live. Read what that passage is actually asking for. Not a performance of religiosity, not a return to the pulpit. A way of living, a visible, daily, embodied demonstration that it is possible to have been through everything and still be standing, still be faithful, still be anchored. That is what the generation beneath you is watching for, whether they know it or not. Think of Elijah on the mountain, not the Elijah who called down fire on Carmel, but the Elijah who collapsed under a tree afterward and asked God to let him die. He was spent. He had nothing left. And God did not rebuke him or replace him. He fed him. He let him sleep. Then he said, "The journey is too much for you. Get up and eat." 1 Kings 19:7. God's answer to an elder's exhaustion was not retirement. It was restoration and recommissioning. Your exhaustion is real. Your slowness is real. But neither of those things disqualifies you from the assignment that belongs specifically to someone who has endured. The young can run. Only the enduring can show what it looks like to finish. Knowing a truth and living inside it are two different things. What you have just heard is not meant to remain in the mind as something understood. It is meant to descend into the day, into the morning routine, the quiet hour, the conversation you have been putting off, the name you have been carrying in prayer without knowing whether it is worth the effort. It is worth the effort. Here are 7 practical keys, not theories, not ideals, but specific things you can begin today that will open the door to everything this video has been pointing toward. First key, name what God has kept you through, out loud, not just in your memory. Most people carry a lifetime of God's faithfulness stored entirely in silence. They know what they have survived. They could list the seasons that should have broken them and did not, but they have never spoken those things aloud, not to another person, not to God, and not to themselves. And what stays unspoken gradually loses its weight as evidence. The memory fades, the doubt creeps back in. And the soul that once knew God was faithful begins to wonder whether it imagined the whole thing. The practice here is simple, and it costs nothing. Speak it, say out loud, to God, in prayer, in a journal entry, in a quiet room, the specific things He has kept you through. Not a general thank you for blessings. Specific testimony, the year that nearly destroyed you. The diagnosis that should have ended differently. The child who came back, the morning you did not think you would survive, and did. Psalm 105:5 says, "Remember the wonders He has done, His miracles, and the judgments He pronounced." The Hebrew word for remember here is not passive recollection. It is an active, intentional return, a deliberate turning of the mind back toward what God has already done, so that the soul does not lose its footing in the present. Gratitude spoken aloud becomes an anchor. It does not just comfort the soul, it steadies it against the current of doubt that rises in quiet seasons. When you name what God has kept you through, you build a record that your faith can stand on the next time everything goes dark.